weapons storm is unleashed, and it's all heading one way. Ukraine is being flooded with a shockwave of new weapons that can reach Moscow. The Kremlin is no longer out of reach, and Russia is already burning. Oil, defense, infrastructure, everything is on fire. Cities are collapsing from the inside. Blackouts, no electricity, no heat. Hundreds of thousands freezing in the dark. On the front line, total devastation. Ukraine's armed forces are tearing the enemy apart. They don't know where to run or how to survive. This is not a setback for Russia, this is the collapse of an empire in real time. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. A true barrage of new weapons. Ukraine has received a new air defense systems for testing. We are talking about the American Tempest surface-to-air missile system from V2X, which uses HEM-114L longbow missiles to engage targets. As of now, it remains unclear how many Tempest air defense systems Ukraine may have received. Given that this is a new American development, it can be assumed that Ukraine obtained one or several prototypes for testing and further refinement of this type of weapon. It is worth recalling that the Tempest air defense system was first unveiled in 2025, very recently, at the AUSA 2025 exhibition held in October just a few months ago. This is a development by V2X, which exists in two versions: a trailer-mounted configuration for protecting stationary facilities and a mobile variant and relatively low-cost drone killer based on lessons learned from the Russia-Ukraine war. However, how inexpensive the operation of such an air defense system will be remains debatable. On the one hand, it is indeed an optimal solution for mobile fire teams based on low-cost COTS buggies. On the other hand, the Tempest air defense system uses HEM-114L longbow missiles to engage targets, with each missile costing up to around $100,000, making the interception of Shahed drones a rather expensive undertaking. Meanwhile, Britain wants to develop ballistic missiles for Ukraine capable of reaching Moscow. According to Reuters, the British government said on Sunday that it will develop a new long-range ballistic missile for Ukraine to support the country's military efforts in the war against Russia.
You defend your cities by having layers of defense, and you partly defend by being able to attack.
Under a project called Nightfall, the British government announced a competition for the rapid development of ground-launched ballistic missiles capable of carrying a 200-kilogram warhead over a distance of more than 500 kilometers. It is noted that the Nightfall missiles would be capable of rapid launch from vehicles. Their range would allow them to reach even Moscow from Ukrainian territory. The launcher must carry at least 2 missiles and ensure a safe launch under conditions of high tactical threat of the entire ammunition load within 15 minutes after stopping at a firing position. After launch, the crew must be able to leave the area within 5 minutes. British firms are being offered a £9 million contract to design, develop and deliver the first 3 missiles for test launches. Not only oil refineries, but defense plants as well. Ukraine's defense forces are expanding the list of military targets inside Russia, delivering painful strikes against strategic enterprises. How Ukraine's deep strikes are shaping the course of the war, and whether attacks on Russian territory are truly reducing Moscow's capacity for mass assaults, we explain in our report.
These are oil refineries. Logistics, warehouses, and defense enterprises. All of these are legitimate military targets for strikes by Ukraine's defense forces. And each of these strikes demonstrates not only that the Ukrainian armed forces have a long reach, but also serves a simple yet very important goal: weakening Russia's military potential.
Until autumn, until a certain pause, there was not a single region of the Russian Federation bordering Ukraine that had not been subjected to strikes on its oil refining industry. In each of these regions, the relevant enterprises were damaged and destroyed. Next, Ukraine is moving on to strikes against power-generating facilities, and strikes against enterprises that are of particular interest and importance to the Russian Federation in terms of the production of weapons, military equipment, ammunition, or related components. And that is precisely why we are talking about a sustainable strategic concept of conducting hostilities in the deep strike style. During
the first week of January 2026, Ukraine successfully struck a large Russian artillery arsenal in the Kostroma region.
There it is burning, everyone is being evacuated, this orange part here. And over here it's like smoke.
The Energia defense plant in the Lipetsk region and several dozen other oil infrastructure facilities in the Russian Federation. From January 2nd to 7th, unmanned systems forces attacked 21 enemy targets. these attacks are not random. They are part of a strategy to put pressure on military infrastructure and the deep rear of the Russian Federation.
Our task is to inflict maximum damage on what we call the military economic potential of the Russian Federation. And
now let's talk in numbers. As a result of Ukrainian deep strike attacks in 2025, Russia lost about $21.5 billion. This is a direct indicator of the scale of Ukrainian strikes' impact on the enemy's economy and military capabilities, the enemy. But there is another no less important result of Ukrainian attacks on Russia's strategic targets. Each individual military strike is a postponed or thwarted potential attack against the nation of Ukraine.
this is already having an impact, because just imagine, if we weren't able to do this, how quickly would Russian industry be developing?
After all, instead of preparing another attack on Ukraine, Russia is forced to redeploy air defenses, change its logistics, and spend resources on protecting its own territory. Of course, Moscow is trying to retaliate against Kyiv for strikes on key defense targets. Although it's important to understand and remember that Russia doesn't need any reason to attack civilians and civilian infrastructure. After all, the Kremlin wants to destroy Ukraine. And for that, they are willing to do anything.
They've already reached the point where they physically cannot end this war. For them, that would be a catastrophe. That's why they will fight to the last soldier. They will fight until the last plane, as long as they have the resources to do so. But when, let's say, internal problems, like the lack of salaries, the absence of any provision for the social needs of the population, come to the forefront, then Russia will simply, as they say, exhaust its resources and won't be able to continue the war. And that's what we're striving for. That's exactly what I want to draw your attention to. This is our strategic goal, which we are trying to achieve by striking Russian territory.
Russia itself spares no expense and uses more expensive and rare means for attacks, such as the Oreshnik, which the Russian Federation used to attack Lviv on the night of January 9th. But this only proves that the strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces are very painful for the Kremlin's military machine, and that Ukraine is on the right track.
Blackout in Belgorod. Hundreds of thousands of Russians are left without electricity and heating amid extreme cold, pushing the city to the brink of a humanitarian crisis. This is what Putin has achieved with his own barbaric shelling of Ukraine. All the details, watch now.
They tried to scare us on TV, saying they would turn off the lights in Ukraine and all of Europe. But in the end, it was Russia itself that experienced a total blackout.
Damn. That's it. There's nothing in the whole city.
A series of explosions preceded the power outage in the entire Russian region. Around midnight, sirens went off in the Belgorod region. And about 10 minutes later, Ukrainian drones struck the occupiers' energy infrastructure.
There goes a flying drone. A small plane. And it's going down. Oh. So where's the air defense?
The Oriel CHP plant was hit. So be it. The regional authorities have not officially confirmed this information, but videos posted online show serious damage at the thermal power plant. As a result of another successful nighttime missile strike on Russia, the entire Belgorod region found itself on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe.
Hello, dear friends. Unfortunately, today is not a good one at all. Morning.
Reluctantly, the governor of Belgorod had to admit that the region is facing serious problems. The numbers cheerfully reported by Gladkov are shocking. Nothing like this has happened in modern Russian history before. We
have 556,000 people without electricity in 6 municipalities.
But it seems that Gladkov himself has no problems with electricity. In the background, all the lights are on in the governor's office. Meanwhile, the Kremlin official continues to shock with the scale of the outages in the region. In
The first part, that's 1,920 apartment buildings. Almost 200,000 people are without water and sewage services.
The main thing is that it's not worse than in the DPR, joke other Russians online about their fellow citizens. The complete paralysis of a major city's life support systems in the middle of winter doesn't elicit even a shred of compassion. No one in the Russian Federation is in a hurry to start collections or bring warm clothes and hot food to the people of Belgorod anymore. The local authorities are practically doing nothing as well. They only express deep concern and promise to assemble working groups for consultations. Meanwhile, in the region, people without heating or electricity are literally starting to freeze to death in their apartments. We
Do not consider responsible for deaths these people.
Soon, the total number of unfortunate people who have tragically died from the severe cold in the Belgorod region could potentially reach many hundreds, if not even thousands, due to the powerful and devastating Baltic cyclone. Francis RFU is literally being buried in snow. Snowdrifts of 65 centimeters and more are expected in Russian cities. A blizzard is raging and traffic on the highways is severely hampered. In such conditions, with no electricity, water or heat, Belgorod is on the verge of freezing and extinction.
The Belgorod region is truly facing very serious humanitarian challenges in terms of energy, heating, electricity, and everything else. Of course, the region has never experienced anything like this before, and this is a serious, very serious situation.
A Belgorod blogger does not rule out that a partial evacuation may begin in the region. Many residents are already trying to flee the powerless ice and snow-covered Frontline city. However, due to the blackout, it is extremely difficult to do so. All the gasoline at gas stations in the region is running out. Drivers are lining up in huge queues for fuel, at least for generators. Here,
this is precisely what the long lines at the gas stations for essential generator fuel typically look like.
gas stations are only selling 5 liters per person. That's not enough to get out of snowbound Belgorod. Yes, and the generator won't last until morning on that amount of fuel. How will Russians left without power keep warm? That's a big question. It seems the city really is on the brink of a humanitarian disaster. The blame for this lies personally with Putin, who started the war in Ukraine and keeps shelling our peaceful cities. Now, thanks to the retaliatory actions, both the Russian armed forces and Russian civilians can fully experience all the delights of life without electricity.
The front has ignited. Ukraine's armed forces are forcefully seizing the initiative. Russia's remaining armored vehicles are falling apart before our eyes, while Ukraine's Grinder for Occupies is operating at full capacity. The Kremlin's elite couldn't withstand the pressure. The enemy is going to extremes, even switching to horses. Ukraine has prepared a new wave of retaliation. What it looks like and whether it can finally rewrite all of the enemy's plans, coming up next.
The destruction of Russian equipment has increased significantly in recent days.
The Ukrainian side, despite the extremely harsh weather conditions, has the ability to detect and, most importantly, destroy the enemy's mechanized columns even before they reach the direct line of combat engagement. This is confirmed by objective monitoring data from both the Russian and Ukrainian sides. In Pokrovsk, a column of more than 30 vehicles and motorcycles was destroyed, where the Russians, once again under the cover of severe weather conditions, tried to break through both in the city itself and accordingly to expand their presence on its outskirts.
At the same time, along with Pokrovsk, fierce fighting continues in the southern direction as well. Huleipol has been one of the hottest spots on the front since the end of last year. However, the Russians still have not been able to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses.
There is also fighting within Huleipol. The situation there is very tense because the enemy is trying to advance and capture the city in order to then move toward Orikhiv and create threats to Zaporizhia in the future. Yes, that is if they manage to carry out these plans. So the situation there was difficult before the new year, and it remained difficult as of January.
At the same time, analysts are noting a change in Russian tactics in many areas. The previous tactic of infiltrating in groups of 2 or 3 people is no longer effective. our drone operators are taking them out even as they approach our positions. That's why the Russian General Staff decided to return to meat assaults.
Now the number of personnel in such groups is really increasing. 5, 6, even 7 people can be advancing at once. This shows that the principle of cannon fodder has started working again in the Russian army. So why is that? Because the orders and directives coming from the Kremlin to advance in certain directions or attempt to occupy certain territories are not being fulfilled by the troops.
Moreover, experts believe that Putin is clearly in a hurry to show results ahead of the upcoming negotiations. For this, it was decided to sacrifice even the remaining armored vehicles. Despite the regular destruction of Russian columns, assault troops are still being sent into battle in vehicles, so they can advance just a few dozen meters further.
Such incidents have been recorded in the area of Ryshin, where the occupiers, using a large amount of armored vehicles, unsuccessfully tried more than 6 times to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Moreover, assault units from the 76th Airborne Division, which is considered elite by Russian standards, were used for these operations. Additionally, a similar tactic involving armored vehicles was used in the areas of Mirnohrad, Rodinske, and in the Dobropilya direction.
But there aren't nearly enough iron horses, let alone armored ones, for everyone. Those less fortunate are given regular horses for the assault. This kind of cavalry was spotted by the defense forces in the Kostiantinivka direction. The result was predictable. The animal was destroyed, but the horses were unharmed, the defense forces reported. However, analysts admit that this direction has indeed become more active.
In the near future, we should expect a period of very intense pressure from 3 sides, with almost constant Russian attacks along the entire front, as well as extremely intense suppression and leveling of the city by various means of destruction. The T-0504 highway is a highly likely direction for an attack, which the Russians are already using quite frequently. In addition, we are observing a significant increase in Russian activity north of Chasiv Yar.
However, at the moment, the situation here is completely under the control of the defense forces, who, by the way, not only managed to repel attacks along the line of contact, but also strike quite effectively at Russian rear positions.
In Crimea, Ukrainian armed forces strike UAVs, hit rolling stock carrying fuel and lubricants at the fuel rack of an oil depot in the settlement of Vardiske. In Donetsk region, in the settlement of Horn, Special Operations Forces struck an ammunition and logistics depot belonging to one of the units of the 51st Army.
At the same time, Kupiansk continues to bring positive news as well. According to the commander of the Achilles Drone Systems Regiment, the situation there has been turned around and the enemy has been blocked on the outskirts of the city, which now completely prevents them from infiltrating the settlement.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon!